This is the Countdown, discussing tomorrow's news today as our top guests tackle the issues that matter. This is the Countdown, discussing tomorrow's news today as our top guests tackle the issues that matter, with a sharp take on every story. And now, here are your hosts, Andrew Weeks and Onyx Duncan.
A very good morning to you and welcome to the Countdown. It is Sunday of February, and we want to thank all of you who are joining us wherever you are in the world. It is Sunday. It is Sunday in Guyana, and there are a lot of things happening in Guyana right now. We are in an election year. We just had the budget debate. We now at the consideration of the estimates. We have seen a new political party launched, and we're seeing a whole lot of things happening rapidly as we get down to the dissolving of Parliament and getting these elections on their way. Onyx Duncan is off today, so I'm running solo this morning. We are having in our headlines, if you didn't get a chance to see it, in the culture news, we are seeing the Arab ministers reject Trump's call to displace Palestinians from Gaza. We are seeing officials and mining companies using corruption, the C word, corruption, or as they would say in Parliament, runnings around licenses and contracts to deny citizens a fair share. Man wanted for abducting ex-lover caught hiding under a bed. Simona Brooms launched a new party. And we are seeing at the bottom there in the title news, government vows to get all foreign businesses in return for jobs and business opportunities. That is something to look at. We're seeing also in the Stabrook news, sweeping Trump tariff, mark retaliation in Canada and Mexico. Trade war has just started between Canada and Mexico and the United States of America. Sheriff Holding says has no affiliation with Ed Hamad, and two found guilty of murdering Chinese man. Man wanted over kidnapping of Allendale woman found under a bed. We just said that's what's breaking in the Stabrook news, and you should read the Stabrook news editorial this morning. A great piece to give you a perspective on what's happening in the country and with the elections and with the budget and with Maduro. You remember what a famous person said about Maduro? Yes? All right. And so that's in the Stabrook news. Remember the member of Parliament said to the Foreign Affairs Minister, Sherrod Duncan, the Foreign Affairs Minister, in the debate, don't row with me, go and row with Maduro. And then we have in the Chronicle, no second guessing in building out world-class sports economy. That's what the president says. And a number probability we introduced in Guyana in February 10. That is, they're telling us that you can keep your number and still switch to a different network. Well, you're going to see how all of that goes. The TNCR confirms no plan in place to finance grandiose plans. And that is what the government is saying. But you have the time, Jack, to meet with GCOM to iron out political issues ahead of elections. It's not saying Jack Deo and his team is going to meet with GCOM. It is saying Jack Deo alone is going to meet with GCOM. Well, what more would you expect University of Guyana staff to receive 8% salary increase this year. There's Manik Chan. That's what's happening in the Times. All right, that's what's happening in the Times. Um, and as you can see as well, if we come over to the Village Voice News, you will see they're saying there that businessman accused of advocating racist threat in desperate attempt to smear Terence Campbell. A call for change was Oscar Jacobs' bold address at the ALP party. We're seeing businessman, a business leader, politician gathered for launch of a new political party. That's the Booms Party. Higher oil output rather, at Permian. And we're seeing the Health Ministry host review meeting on tobacco cessation clinic. And these are some of the headlines we are seeing in our papers today. We see the opposition leader Norton demands biometric voting and a clean voters list for 2025 elections. All right, and we're also seeing here the former Minister of Public Infrastructure, David Patterson, said, "Yet here we are again in 2025 with blackouts happening every single day." And so it goes on and it goes on. You can read those headlines in your papers as you pick it up at the stands or online this morning. But today, I'm having with me Chief Dr. Eric Phillips, the Chairman of the Operations Committee and the Executive Director of AGDA. And he is here this morning to give us a perspective on what he thinks on the budget, how the budget is affecting the African community. He's going to give us some updates in terms of what AGDA has in store for 2025 and the other activities that is happening right now. African Month in terms of history, African Heritage History Month. We have just had Kwanzaa. We're now into Ghana Day. We have coming up Emancipation Day, and there's a whole lot of stuff happening also in the Reparation Committee sphere. And he's going to come and give us an update on all of that. But we must let you know that according to a Criterion News report of August 25, 2023, when there was this big Reparation Committee gathering at the University of Guyana, where it helped to negotiate with the Gladstone heirs of Ghana, includes both slavery and indentureship. There was a press release on that matter. There was unclear issue pertaining to if any amount of monies were paid on behalf of the Gladstone family for reparation. Mr. Phillips is here. He's going to give us an update on that. And so, Chief Eric Phillips, good morning. Happy New Year to you, sir. Put on your mic and let's chat.
Yes, good morning. How are you?
I'm great, Doctor. Happy New Year to you and your family. It's February already in 2025 and a lot is happening. First,
yes,
give us an update on where we are with the Reparations Committee. What is happening with the Reparation Committee in terms of what took place in 2023, where the Gladstone family came in, they asked for pardon and apology. There is no reparational fee that was paid. We don't know anything about that. But give us an update on how far we are with the Reparation Committee in the Caribbean.
Thank you. As you know, I wear two hats. One is chair of the Ghana Reparations Committee, and the second is the vice chair of the CARICOM Reparations Commission. Yes. And they have intertwining mandates, but different activities. Let me first start with the Gladstones, because we brought them here in 2023 at the bicentennial of the 1823 Demerara Slave Rebellion. 6 of them came. We had several days of meetings. Since then, we've been negotiating with them to do some things in Buxton and other communities. Those plans are being developed. I visited them last year to continue that discussion. And I'm also working with the former ICJ judge from Jamaica, Patrick Robinson, because he's also looking at what they should be doing in Jamaica. I'll have more information by this August on that, but we've identified 3 or 4 major projects. I understand that UG has received some funds, and we're planning to make sure that people of African descent in Guyana receive their just cause. So that's there on the Gladstone activity. As you know,
Mhm.
Gladstone is part of the Heroes of Slavery initiative in the UK, where several descendants of former slaveholders have formed a group. And we're also working with them to lobby the UK government and other governments in terms of reparatory justice.
Yes.
In terms of our activities in Guyana, the Guyana Reparations Committee, we had a tremendous year in 2024. As you know, we meet every Thursday from 5 p.m. at the Museum of African Heritage on Marima Avenue in Bel Air. We cover a variety of issues, including local reparations initiatives, and we also do a lot of history. It is sad that a country like Guyana, that has 6 different ethnic groups, and now have a proliferation of other cultures, Venezuelans, Brazilians, Cubans, Americans who are here, that we have no understanding of our own history. And that to me will create a Trojan horse in the future. But we do meet every Thursday. We're the only group in the world that has reparations now TV programs. We have 2 every month. The second and fourth Sundays of every month it is shown on NCN because we want to have national coverage, and also because our budget is controlled by the Ministry of Youth, Culture and Sports, and any expenditure over a certain amount has to go to tender. So in terms of getting on Channel 9 and Halagala and other channels that have predominantly a Black audience, we are preempted from that because of the budgeting cycle and where the budget is.
Remind us, Doctor, what was the budget that they gave to you the last time?
We
What was
have
the amount?
we've had an annual budget of 10 million Ghana dollars. We've had that for the last 5 years. Initially, it used to be 5 million or 25,000 US. The Granger administration raised that to 10 million. Last year, we asked for 22 million. We still got the same 10. And I don't know what we will get for 2025 because we were not consulted. But our activities are detailed. We have line items. For example, we have Sankofa, which is to educate our young people apart from the TV programs. We also have events at Holocaust Day, which is the 12th of October, because that's the date in 1492 when Columbus came here. We have Kwanzaa activities. We have Emancipation Day activities. We have Black History Month activities. As a matter of fact, this February, we're going to be going to Essequibo, Berbice, Linden, and on the East Coast with a mobile exhibition entitled Africa Before Chattel Slavery, because a lot of people in Guyana and the Caribbean believe that our history begins with chattel slavery. They forget that we are the creators of mathematics, science, medicine, on and on. And we had great kingdoms before European colonizers came and intervened into world history and African history.
Yeah.
Every Thursday, we have 30 to 40 people. Sometimes we have 60. We are open to the public. We're the only reparations group in the Caribbean that does that. All the other committees are made up of representatives appointed by governments. But since 2015, we made a strategic decision to open up every one of our meetings to the public. And that has revitalized us. That's given us energy. And that results in the Guyana Reparations Committee meeting more in 1 year than all the other committees combined.
How many members do you have on the committee, you said? How many
We
members
have
do you
12
have?
committees, which are African organizations,
Yeah.
an economist, a land rights, and 2 young people. We're the only committee in the Caribbean that don't have a lot of PhDs. If you look at the other committees, PhDs in this, that, and that. I think whilst that is relevant, it also makes the committee static and too political. So we open it up to the public. We have equally male and female commissioners. And just to give you an understanding of why it's worked, we never knew that 4 of the 9 Amerindian groups in Guyana came to Guyana 100 to 200 years after we were here. We always were told about the First Peoples. Now, if we had gotten the historian from UG, which we had requested but never got when Professor Opadeyu was the chair, vice chancellor, we would have been told that all the First Peoples were here because that's our history. But the YYs, the Macushis and the Wapishaners came from Brazil, and the Aracunas came from Venezuela. And none of them were here during the 1763 rebellion. So as much as the Amerindians are claiming they're first people, and indeed the Caribs and Araks are, 4 of the 9 in Guyana did not come to Guyana before us, yet they have reparations under the Amerindian Act of 2006. So I'm just giving you an example of the benefits of opening it up to the public, the benefits of not having too many PhDs who are caught up in their own egos. We do work, we go into the community, etc. Now, because of our activity, I was elected to be a vice chair of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, and this is my second term. It ends next year. The CARICOM Reparations Commission is part of the CARICOM structure. So we have national committees, we have a CARICOM Reparations Commission, and we have a Prime Ministerial Subcommittee on Reparations. All of the chairs of national reparations committees, and there are now 14 because Haiti just reinitiated theirs, we meet under the tutelage of Sahil Beckles, who is the chair of the CARICOM Reparations Commission. I'm one of the vice chairs, and we look at it globally. And then we're guided by the Prime Ministerial Subcommittee on Reparations, which is comprised of 6 heads of states and chaired by Barbados, therefore Mia Motley. Now, as vice chair of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, I have global responsibilities. So last year, for example, I was in Colombia dealing with COP16 and land rights. Most people don't know that people of African descent in Latin America and the Caribbean are claiming 205 million hectares of lands, ancestral lands. These are lands they've lived on. But the governments in Latin America and the Caribbean have only given them 9 million hectares. And a lot of it is in the Amazon. So we have this myth that indigenous people dominate the Amazon, when in reality, 64% of what goes on in the Amazon is managed by people of African descent. So I went to pre-COP 16 with an invitation of Vice President Marquez. And also in October, I was in Bahia for the Pan-African pre-conference. There's supposed to be one in Togo. It's going to be this year. And I also spent a great deal of time in Costa Rica pursuing land rights. In 1870, a lot of Jamaicans went to Costa Rica to build a railroad. The government of Costa Rica ran out of money, so they gave 800,000 square miles to the famous Chiquita Banana Company. They didn't have money to pay the Jamaicans, so they gave them lands. Those lands are under the ocean. Now the ocean has receded, and those lands have become extremely valuable around Limon and Puerto Viejo. And now the Costa Rican government is trying to steal those lands under bogus laws of maritime and ecotourism and climate change. Yeah. So I've been working that on behalf of CARICOM. I'm also heavily involved with the Africa Union. As you know, this year is the year of reparations in the Africa Union. We had an MOU with them in Accra the previous year when CARICOM, Latin America and the Caribbean, especially the USA, met with Africans in Accra, and we had an agreement. So this year, the AU has announced 2025 to be the year of reparations to people of African descent. So CARICOM will be working with them because we're the most advanced in that area. A lot of this has to do with people in Africa never being involved in reparations, even though the rape and plunder of Africa started with Africa. And so they are now looking at what does the European powers owe them for reparations. This year, by the way, in March, it's the anniversary of the 1884 Berlin Conference, 1884-1885, 100 years. So there are a lot of things going on there. I'm also involved with the Permanent Forum for People of African Descent. As you know, there's going to be another, the 4th meeting in New York in April. Yeah. I'm involved with them in a couple of initiatives, especially dealing with the Costa Rican process, where I involve UNWEG, UN CERD. I got PJ Patterson involved on their behalf, and so the Jamaican government is now engaged because of my intervention with the Costa Rican government through the Costa Rican Jamaican thing. So I've also been appointed the chairman of the Africa Union, Africa Diaspora 6th Region High Council for CARICOM. That is a global organization that will implement the Africa Union resolution for diaspora involvement. As you know, the diaspora is the sixth region. So I'm part of a group that is global. We have people, Africans in China, Japan, South Korea, Brazil, and I'm the facilitator for the CARICOM group. As a matter of fact, at 1 o'clock today, we have a monthly meeting. I'm
Yeah.
also a director, because of my activity in reparations, on the Global Legal and Advisory Council, which was announced last year in Geneva, and we will be having a big event at the Geneva, at the New York Permanent Forum activity. So that gives you a summary. Next month, or this month, the 9th to the 13th, I will be in Jamaica, where we will be finalizing the 10-point plan. As you know, we had a 10-point plan in 2015. It's evolved. Now
Yes.
we're dealing with the diaspora. We're dealing with female issues. We have the Brattle report, which says the Europeans owe us $107 trillion. And in May this year, because of the Commonwealth Conference in Samoa, the UK and CARICOM leaders will be meeting to discuss development/reparations.
Yeah.
So lots of things are going on in that area. And we will get reparations. You see, the Dutch apologize. The British don't want to apologize, but we're moving beyond the stage of asking them to apologize. If somebody shoots you, you don't have to ask them to apologize. You take them to court or they get locked up. So
Right.
we're looking at how we reposition the elements of the 10-point plan. Right now, of course, we ask for an apology, but we're starting to understand, given the Dutch apology, that they may be playing a geopolitical game and do not want to pay reparations. And finally, I'm writing a book called The Geopolitics of Reparations, which deals with many things. Most people don't realize that it was the Catholic Church in 1452 with three papal bulls, 1452, Dum Diversas, 1455, Romanus Pontifex, 1492, Inter Caethera, that they created something called the doctrine of discovery, and they created slavery. They said anybody who is not a Catholic or who doesn't have a Catholic soul can be enslaved. And that was the beginning of Columbus and all these people, Henry the Navigator, enslaving people of African descent. So I've had a lot of involvement with the Vice President of Colombia. She met with the Pope 2 Decembers ago. I'm part of a small group of 12 people working with her to create an apostolic exhortation to see if we can get the Catholic Church and the Holy See to apologize. So that's a big scan of all the things that are going on in reparations here in Guyana and in CARICOM.
I hear you, Doc. I hear you. But what I am wondering is all of what you just said. How has it been effective with governments, especially our government, to act on behalf of the African communities in meeting some of their land rights, in meeting some of their reparation rights, in meeting some of their ancestral
Excellent
rights?
question.
How is
Excellent
that
question.
forcing government to act with what you just said?
Well,
What troubles are you getting with that?
I'll give you my personal view.
Mhm.
All governments are not really acting totally in our interest because of the geopolitics. They're small countries. That's why they came together initially as a group to pass the resolution in 2013 to pursue reparations. We had last year this annoying and racist intervention about asking for reparations for indentureship. Indentureship was not a crime against humanity, and indentureship should not be merged with indigenous genocide and African enslavement. So heads of states, particularly in Guyana and Suriname, to some extent Trinidad, have been pushing that. It's vile. I've opposed it, and therefore I don't think they're acting in our interests. And most of the reparations heads of community of national committees are supporting me. And so in the 10-point plan, it should have been out last year to rewrite. A lot of it was delayed because of this indentureship issue. It's a racist issue. It's a Trojan horse. You could see what's going on in Gaza. You know how reparations is going to be a tough issue. Why would you bring an issue of indentureship into our avenue? When indentureship was approved by the Indian government, the British government, it was a contract, it was a law. They got paid. They didn't die. How many indigenous people, how many Indians died to build Guyana? 473,000 Africans died to build Guyana. So I'm saying that as much as we have this National Committee and CARICOM Reparations Committee, there's some geopolitical forces that are forcing our heads of states not to act in our own interest. We, as African people in Ghana, should be getting reparations from Guyana because our ancestors created 15,000 square miles or 18% of Guyana. And as I said, 4 of the indigenous groups who have reparations under the Amerindian Act of 2006 were not here before us. And yet 473,000 of us died. We cleared 15,000 square miles. We moved 100 million tons of earth. We built 2.58 million miles of ocean. We did 2,176 miles of sea defense. So we're going to look at the Ghana Reparations Committee from 2 perspectives: what we're doing in the CARICOM reparations architecture and what we need to do for Ghana. Because right now we're at the bottom of the ladder in Guyana. All sorts of people are coming here and getting land. And if we're not careful, we're going to be fully marginalized in another 5 years. So that's an issue that is an African issue in Guyana. It's a political issue that's not being addressed by the opposition or the government, and it has to be addressed. So that's
what would it take to make those political leaders act, especially the opposition? What would push them to come to the table and to sit down, put aside all that is going on, that this is an issue, as you said, a Trojan horse that is coming up that will affect us in the future, will affect our children in the future as Black people, as African people. What would push our Black leaders, from political leaders, from community leaders, from church leaders, to act, to push this agenda forward?
It's a difficult question. Last week we hosted the film Mosiah, Marcus Garvey. And that philosophy is not a philosophy understood by African leaders in Guyana or any leader. It is very difficult because our political parties of all stripes, including the new ones, are claiming to be national parties. In claiming to be national parties, they're expecting votes from other ethnic groups. And therefore, they're very unwilling to speak out on African rights. 2 political parties in the opposition are pushing an Amerindian rights agenda. They've never said anything about Africans. Our villages are being depleted. In 2030, the International Panel on Climate Change says that Georgetown and the coast will be underwater. All of our villages at risk. No one is talking about that. These are strategic issues. These are key issues in terms of social inclusion, economic inclusion, and stability and inclusive growth. So I watch in awe as all these political parties keep speaking about inclusive growth, but they're not talking about us, and they're not talking to us. They're not speaking with us. And so that is the dilemma. Regardless of if it's the main opposition, the new opposition, the AFC, PNC, and all these alphabet parties that are coming together, I've never seen them say anything about people of African descent. And yet if you combine Africans and mixed Africans in Ghana, we're almost 60% of the population.
Have you made courtesy calls? Have you made courtesy calls to these leaders and to give them an update on the incoming doom on the African community?
Yeah, I've spoken to all of the main parties, and I've spoken 2 years ago. I spoke to the president about it, and I wrote an article called "One Guyana." I gave a speech at African Holocaust Day where I spoke about One Guyana and what it should mean. And if I could find it, I said, One Guyana should be about having a strategic vision of nation building in a rights-based driven democracy with a shared and common vision of inclusiveness that embodies and incorporates shared values, shared goals, shared responsibilities and accountability, shared governance, shared resources, shared decision-making, shared transparency, and shared benefits. So we are stuck in a winner-take-all political system that will drive ethnic division, as you could see from the budget. We are doing this at a time when we have over 100,000 Venezuelans here. So that's an internal as well as an external risk. We have massive growth in the economy that is one-dimensional in terms of the composition of the private sector. We don't have a Black economic architecture. I've developed a development plan for people of African descent, which I've shared with some people. We need to have a global understanding of where Guyana is geopolitically. We need to understand that in one generation from now, we may have outsiders who may actually be ruling Guyana because of population inflows, because of intermarriage, and because of all the resources we have here. We're a tremendously rich country. It's not just oil, it's gold, it's diamonds, it's uranium, it's manganese, it's rare earths. We can grow 200 fruits and vegetables. We have a lot of fresh water. We're geopolitically, strategically located as the only English-speaking country in Latin America and the Caribbean. So our politicians really are not thinking long term. As I look at the budget, which we'll come to, all of the strategic stress facing Guyana are not being addressed in the budget. The budget is just an accounting activity as far as I'm concerned.
Dr. Phillips, very good point you made there. What have you advised the opposition leaders to do in terms of, I mean, political leaders, in terms of the African leaders, community leaders, to do to
It's not an
make
issue of opposition political leaders. All the political leaders need to understand that we're an integral part of this society and we should be included in many ways in the budget. Just to give you an example, there's $11 billion in the budget for part-time program. When you look at who's getting that, you'll see that we're excluded in the majority. That's 23,000 jobs people are getting paid for every month. That's almost like a universal basic salary. If you look at the 1.3 billion going to indigenous people for the CSOs, that's 2,390 Amerindians getting the same monthly part-time job. Why is that not happening in our villages where we have a lot of unemployment, where we have a lot of poverty? So as I analyze the budget, I look at it differently from the politicians. I look at it strategically. I look at it in terms of global threats. I look at it in terms of the geopolitics of having oil and what Trump may do and what Venezuela may do. I look at all those dimensions. And if you look at all those dimensions, then you'll have a fundamentally different budget, and you'll have inclusion and discussion of the budget, and you'll have a fundamentally different political system, because the winner take all is putting us most at risk geopolitically, because we can become an ethnocracy, and that has all sorts of negative connotation.
Could you develop on that a little bit more for me? Because the question in terms of the effects of this budget, the effects of it having on the African community, you said we are in the minority.
Yes, let me
Develop on
give
that
you
a
a
little
good
bit more,
example.
if you
The
please.
budget has $780+ billion in procurement. I will guess that we have less than 1%, if that. Now, other cultural groups in Guyana are dominating that procurement process. 70% of a national budget is often procurement. This year, it's $782 billion out of $1,380 billion budget, or 1.32 trillion. We don't have any private sector companies to benefit from oil. We're essentially locked out from oil because we never had generational wealth, and because we never had policies in place by any government to build a black private sector. If you look at the limited procurement prior to oil, it was all ethnically based. If you look at the laws that are there, they drive certain behavior, and we're excluded. So coming now with oil, which is the massive wealth that Guyana is now accumulating, we are getting nothing out of it. All the roads, all the bridges, all the whatever it is, we do not have companies involved in that. Local content has been misused. I did a presentation at UG in 2016 and 2018, stating what we should be doing from a local content point of view. We should not also be selling our land. Land is generational wealth. We have all sorts of people coming in Guyana in the guise of companies, in the guise of foreign initiatives, buying up our land, and land is our wealth. We should be using our land as an incentive to motivate our young people to go to school. You go to school, you pass an exam, you pass high school, you get 100 acres of land, you go to UG. So there are lots of things that we are not doing to benefit Guyanese, and especially African Guyanese. I would have a whole different approach to governance, a whole different budget. Each of the 10 counties of Guyana needs to have a strategic plan that is based on a development model. And then we have the overarching national budget that incorporates all of these and deals with the other holistic issues. So our whole planning cycle, our whole model of governance is unsuitable for an oil-based economy that has barely 1 million people in the geopolitics of this world, especially when you're seeing bipolarism, you're seeing Trump, you're seeing Putin, and of course, China is, if you look at the China model, which is something we should be looking at, we're not even looking at that. All we're looking at is how to get wealthy, how to own power, and we are throwing our citizens under the bus.
Doc, I know that our Constitutional Reform Commission is not fully active as yet in terms of meeting and
No. Let
discussing
me correct you.
constitutional
We had a
matters.
constitutional reform committee under the last government. There was a report. Nobody has seen it. The key people who've been talking about constitutional reform for the last decade, including myself, we weren't consulted. So we've had this fake constitutional reform that only comes up during an election year to mamagay us. If we're serious about constitutional reform, that could be done in a year. We have all the models. We can look at globally what works in a multi-ethnic society. We simply do not want. We want winner take all, and whoever wins, whether it's the opposition or the current government, will not move to a different model because it serves the politicians' needs and not the needs of the people of Ghana. And that will put us in real bad trouble in the next 5 years.
You're saying that
I stopped giving them excuses. We know what we need to do. Jimmy Carter, bless his soul, said we knew what to do. It's just that we're interested in ethnocracies and winner take all and racial exclusion. That's the bottom line.
I want to come back to this Constitutional Reform Committee that was put together last year by the government. Did it involve you? Did it involve the African Community Committee? Did it involve AGDA? Did it involve the Reparations Committee? Did it
what happens in Guyana? Let's be honest. If you look at constitutional reform, it's done by intellectuals who have their own party interests at heart. So the previous constitutional reform, we came up with these constitutional committees. We still don't have a human rights committee. We have rights, Amerindians, we have this. But we need to be serious. Having, for example, an ethnic relations commission is a joke, because that forces you to put people in that committee that deals with ethnic issues. What we need is a human rights commission with experts that deal with human rights issues, which are broader than just ethnic issues. So we define institutions that are consistent with winner take all. We then populate them with people who have political, how can I put it, political goals. And so as much as we have constitutional reform, we've done nothing systematically to move ourselves forward. So I don't know why we need an Ethnic Relations Commission when we don't have a Human Rights Commission. The Ethnic Relations Commission can only deal with ethnic issues. So I'm just telling you that we've been playing games with constitutional reform for quite a while. We're not serious about it. Every year, just prior to elections, we hear there's a constitutional reform, but the political parties don't have any interest because they're not looking at Guyana's national interest. They're looking at party interests or political interests. And that is the problem. We can't do that when we have oil. We can't do that in this geopolitical environment.
Yeah. What would be the ideal Constitutional Reform Commission committee to you? What would be the ideal one you would recommend?
We need constituency elections. We have people in parliament who are clueless about their constituencies and therefore are subjected to political directives. Why do we have a list where the winner or the opposition leader says who goes to parliament? We need qualified people who do work in communities, who have expertise in specific areas. So most countries have that. If I'm in Georgetown, who represents Georgetown in Parliament? Who represents Linden? Who represents Annandale? Who represents any, we don't. We have a political joke as a constitution and as an electoral system. So we need to have people running in their communities, representing community issues so that when they go to Parliament, they talk about what's going on in their communities. Right now, we don't have that. That's just one element. We also should not have a winner-take-all. We need a head of state that is an executive head of state, and we need a prime minister who sits in Parliament that deals with issues facing these constituents who have their elected members dealing with real grassroots issues.
Would you
We're
recommend,
not
Doc?
serious about constitutional reform.
Right. Would you recommend a model like Switzerland for Guyana constitution
There are about
reform?
8 different models. What we have is an ethnic, winner-take-all, colonial mentality model of divide and rule, and that's what it will always do. I listened to 2 debates on the budget, and I turned my TV off because it's a circus.
Well, we're talking about a debate now. I mean,
The debate
you,
is a disgrace to democracy, it's a disgrace to Guyana. Where people there cursing out and talking about historical things that have no relevance to the future, where it's all about personality and all about people showing off a few words. There's nothing of substance. And just to show you how we have a bad political system, we have a budget that the opposition cannot change regardless of what good arguments they put in place. If I were the opposition, I would not go to parliament to debate the government's budget. That's laziness. That puts you to disadvantage because you're fighting with somebody else's ground rules, especially since you can't change anything. I've
balance of
often
power.
said, since I was a co-founder of the reform group a long time ago, that what the
Yes.
opposition needs to do is to go to parliament with their own budget and say, for education, this is what I would do. We don't care what the PPP is saying or the government is saying. As a party, if I were in power, this is how I would spend the money. Why go debate a budget that you can't change? A budget is about priorities, it's about political priorities, about national priorities. You should go there and say, for health, I would do this. For education, I would do this. Do you know we have a failed education system in the Caribbean and in Guyana? Last year, 4.9% of all people in the Caribbean, 200,000 students, passed 5 subjects with math and English. That is a reason-wild calamity. And it's worse in Guyana because we have oil and gas. So every year we put up some placards, some billboards with the top students. When 12,000 other students are failing because we don't have teachers. Education is about teacher quality. It's not about building buildings. Look at the models in Scandinavian nations. Look at what China is doing. We're in an AI world. We're surrounded by Brazil, Portuguese, Venezuela, Spanish, Suriname, Dutch, French, Guyana, French. And we don't teach languages in school. My secretary in Belgium, when I was there on behalf of AT&T, spoke 6 languages. How can you have an educational system that's not preparing our children to deal with the world? What we can do, bringing people from Bangladesh or Cuba or Russia? We are losing our country because the education system is not addressing core issues. It's not aligned to our national economic exposure. It's not aligned to where the geopolitics of the world is going. So reading a budget and telling me you're putting $2 billion for for a school or for school meals, we need a comprehensive revamp of our educational system. And if we don't do that soon, we're doomed to lose this country to other people in a generation. So those are the types of things I'm talking. Why go to parliament and cuss up and dress up and look stupid to people who are intelligent based on your arguments? We need serious people in government, and you can only do that if you have constitutional reform, where you put the right people in the right spots, not idiots because they have political affiliations or history. All the parties are doing that to us, opposition and government.
So you're saying you need an inclusive government with a prime minister who will represent the interests of all the people in the country. You need
Right.
to have everybody at the table, all communities at the table, all community leaders at the
Through
table.
constituency elections. I mean, look at Trinidad. Trinidad, you do that. Jamaica, you do that. Why? We're not smart enough to know that makes the most sense? We are smart enough, but we don't want to, as Jimmy Carter said. We have a political system that will destroy us internally and externally. It exposes us to all sorts of things. We have a lot of Venezuelans here, and some are running legitimately from Maduro. Trump is going to send back a lot of others. We have no migration strategy.
No, that's another
Because
story.
some people want some of them to vote. It doesn't understand what it's doing to the social dynamics of our people. It doesn't understand that the school system doesn't teach Spanish and what's going to happen with those children. It doesn't understand all these issues about cultural alignment, about values. And we have
But
porous borders.
I want you to go back a little bit for me and develop on this point where you said that in a not too distant future, we will become a minority in Guyana because of all the different Venezuelans and all the different immigrants who are coming to the country, and getting all the jobs, getting all the opportunities, getting all the benefits, and so to speak. And we, not too long from now, can become a second class citizen. Develop a
Yeah,
little bit more on that point in terms of what
yeah.
is best
Given
for our
our
nation.
resources, which
Yes.
are massive, we need more than 3 million people here to develop Guyana. We should be looking at people out of the Caribbean, people out of the University of the West Indies, people who have a common history, a common culture, a common value system. We don't. Instead, our education system is so weak, and we're not even modifying it, that we're going to have to import 100 to 200,000 people a year in order to keep up with our growth. Some speak different languages, some have different attitudes, some have different cultural preferences, some are racist. And we are not addressing the poverty in our situation, that education could be a pathway to bring our people out of poverty if it's aligned properly with education. We should have an education system that links University of Guyana, all of our institutes, and our high schools in a broader service architecture like Israel. I mean, I know national service has its own issues, but we need to redefine it. We need to have all of our young people trained. All of them don't need to be engineers and lawyers and doctors and all of that. But we need to make sure that they have a viable life in this prosperous economy, because we're creating inequalities so massive. And then when you bring in other cultures and other races with other priorities, you're going to have a problem. Look, this is an article, Guyana 2050, Old Dan Paul's Dream. This was written in the West Indian, January 11, 2020. And this particular article talks exactly about what I'm saying, that in a generation, we will probably have a different political party with outsiders and people who are born here, the parents of foreign people, who will have a major say in a winner-take-all election, because they'll have the capital to divide and rule and to do all sorts of subterfuge. This was written in 2010, 2020. You should go find this article. It gives you all the details. But if you were to look strategically at where Guyana is geopolitically, we don't have these strategic thinkers. And therefore, we're putting the entire country at risk, including and especially people of African descent and Amerindian people. Oh, I can't hear you. Sorry. Oh, I still can't hear you. Sorry.
You hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
I was saying that a lot of persons would have missed the point that you said, that the Amerindians may not have been the first peoples in Guyana. Develop
Let
on
me
that.
clarify.
Develop
The
on that point.
Amerindians were here, if you look at the history, around 12,000 BC, coming through the Bering Strait. Of course, after then, you had Africans from Mali, the Mali Empire, who came this part of the world thousands of years before Columbus. But I'm saying specifically to Guyana, we have 9 tribes, and 4 of those tribes came to Guyana after Africans were brought here. The Waiwais, who are at the bottom of Guyana and Conishan, the Makushis, the Wapishanas, they came from Brazil, the Rio Branco area of Brazil, running from the Portuguese. The Aracunas came from Venezuela. So 4 of the 9 tribes have not been in Guyana before Africans have been here. That's my point. And that's historically correct.
Well, if you missed that, you just got it. Doc, let's
And
jump
it's
a
not
little.
in our history books. In the same way that 2 years ago, I found a tribe in Suriname, the Quinties, that left Guyana in 1763 and went to Suriname. They live there now.
Mhm.
So our history is incomplete. Why we don't want to teach history in the schools? Because we don't want all the ethnic groups to realize that we have a shared history here, and that
Yeah.
Africans have played a role, the village movement, the greatest entrepreneurial move in any post-slavery society. By not teaching history and the true history, our politicians are able to become racial entrepreneurs at election time and separate us using the winner-take-all.
Doc, when you said that the African people, some of the African people in our leaders in our country are weak, are you talking about weak in strength or weak in intellect and planning and organizing
I
and
didn't say
leadership?
the word weak. I said they are not, they don't have an African agenda. They don't understand the role that they need to be playing in making sure that Africans are included in the growth and development of Ghana. I've
Mm.
yet to hear one of them speak specifically about an African development plan. Nigel has spoken about an Amerindian development plan. Granger had a 10-point plan for Amerindian people. What about us? The Indians have their own national development plan. That's the budget and the private sector.
So we need an African development plan.
And I've
Who's
developed one.
who's going to do it? Let's see who's going to do it. Doc, we're into election year. It's as they call it. It is a circus, the silly season, and a number of parties. We see Anok is meeting with the different
Let me try
parties.
to change the narrative. When
What
we
is your
say,
plan? What do you see going to happen down the road with this election?
okay,
What are you seeing happening?
let me change the narrative, because when we say it's the silly season, we are accepting the lawlessness and racial division that will come with the campaign. We should be saying that this is the most important season in Guyana's history, because we have to look at it geopolitically. If
Mm.
we have the same behavior as we saw in Parliament of division, of course out, we calling it the silly season because we don't want to call it what it is, a season of racial division. The last election, I was shocked when I saw what was on Facebook, when I saw what intellectuals that I respected, what they were writing about African people, calling them horses, donkey, thieves, monkeys, just to divide. When I look at what happened to the Henry brothers, when I look at the election issue about counting, we're setting ourselves up for a very terrible situation. So we shouldn't be calling it the silly season. It's a very dangerous season. That's what I would call it. And our political leaders need to understand that, but they don't have any interest in that. This is about divide and rule, about ethnic census, about ethnic ruling, and everything will go to ensure that that happens, and therefore the country will be divided.
And what would be your what would be your advice to leaders and to the voters in terms of what to look for as to where to cast their votes
Well,
for change?
the voters have already been set in cast because of the budget, because of what Indian communities are getting, because of what Amerindian communities are getting, because of what African communities are not getting in the budget. So the budget in itself is an election tool. Um, and it set the stage for the broader discussion, couched in terms of inclusive growth and one Guyana and all of that. So the election season has been set. The election results have been set. If you're not going to have biometrics, if you're not going to change a voters list that is now 781,000, the election is a thing accomplished. The question is it in the best interest of Guyana? I see lots of political parties being formed. None of them know they can't win. So why are you being formed? Whose interests are you supporting? What is the best situation for Guyana for me is that no political party gets 48% in Guyana. This way, all of the political parties need to sit down and come up with a budget that is in the interest, national interest, it's in the interest of our sovereignty, that deals with critical issues. For example, what's going to happen in 2030 when Georgetown and the whole East Coast is under flood, according to all the scientific evidence that we have with climate change, IPCC? We've known this for 8 years. The seawall cannot protect us. All of
Mm.
the ancestral lands are going to be underwater. UG is going to be underwater. If you look at 2005, when we had 60% of our economy lost within 2 weeks. What is going to happen to all those ancestral lands, Indian and African? What's going to happen to us culturally, politically, especially since we have oil? Will we have somebody invading us whilst we're in chaos? Will we become the 50 something state of the US? All these are issues. So we're not dealing with serious issues. We're dealing with budget, which are just number crunching and political priorities. We're not dealing with threats. What are the threats? The threats are 2030 with the flooding. The threats are uncontrolled migration from Venezuela and a further influx of people coming in from Venezuela who have been kicked out of the US. The threats are our education system, where most of our children are failing. The threats are a winner-take-all elections. The threats are land rights. The threats are all sorts of things. Where are you seeing those threats addressed in the budget? Where are you seeing opposition leaders, political leaders talking about those issues? I don't see it.
Doc, since we talk about the border situation, we are in looming behind in the West. We're seeing that Maduro is crouching into our land piece by piece. He met with an envoy from the United States of America. We see that Rubio, the new Secretary of State, seems to be not really the Secretary of State, because we are seeing that the man that Trump sent there seems to be the de facto Secretary of State, and he's making deals with with Maduro. And it looked like Guyana is in serious problems, foreign wise, foreign affairs wise.
No,
What are you seeing there?
I'm an engineer, so I don't deal with myths and false thoughts.
So
Venezuela would never invade Guyana. If
Never.
Venezuela invades Guyana, the U.S. will bomb them out, and perhaps the U.S. wants them to invade Guyana. So I stop this nonsense about Venezuela invading Guyana. They will never invade Guyana. They have no win-win situation for them invading Guyana. So all these hypotheses, and I see it in the papers about Venezuela invading us, what we have is a Venezuela invasion internal to Guyana right now. That is the invasion, not Venezuela coming to Guyana. We're dealing with the wrong issues. We're asking the wrong questions. We're solving the wrong problem. And that's the problem with our political architecture. We're not defining the right questions. And therefore, we give wrong answers because we're answering problems that aren't really a problem. Let me ask you, do you think Venezuela would invade Guyana? First, they got to come through the forest. How many planes they have? How far are they from all the U.S. bases in the Caribbean? How far are they from Florida? How far are they from El Salvador? It just doesn't make sense and will never happen.
So just a game.
So let's stop this stupidness
Just a game.
about Venezuela invading Guyana.
Yes. It's just a war game. It's kind of thing you're
It's
seeing
not
there.
even war games. Maduro knows if he invades Guyana, he's dead. So end the story. Because Exxon is here and he will be invading American rights, American properties. So let's stop this stupidness.
So there will never be an invasion in Guyana. Never.
No.
Can't happen.
Can't happen. Wouldn't happen. Doesn't make political sense to Venezuela. It's just drama. Listen, when Guyana was asked to go to St. Vincent for the Argyle agreement,
Meeting. Yes.
Right. It was Caribbean leaders protecting their own self-interest. It had nothing to do with Guyana, because they were worried that if Venezuela rattled it, tourists won't come to their islands. So they didn't do it on behalf of Guyana. Let's get that clear. They did it on behalf of their own self-interest, because they know themselves that Venezuela can never invade Guyana. So we were there to be like a puppy show. We signed an agreement that has no relevance, because a month later, he's going to have somebody who's responsible for Venezuela Essequiba. Let's stop the nonsense.
Do you think the Guyana should still pursue their case at the CCJ,
Yeah.
at the CCJ, the World Court?
ICJ, and that's where we need to be, and we will win. Because if we lose that, a lot of other territorial issues globally will be thrown into chaos, and that will not happen. The 1899 agreement is an agreement that will stick. So our politicians throw out all these false issues out there to take us off the real issue, and that is what's going on in Guyana. How are we preparing our youth to deal with this multicultural, multilingual environment so that we can manage our resources, which are rapidly not becoming ours? If you look at the agreement, we're getting 1.39 barrels of oil out of every 100. That is outrageous.
Well, that's another story too. Our oil deal, our oil, based on what the minister said in Parliament yesterday, he couldn't even answer the questions. What the other three contractors that they have sought to be a part of this oil exploration, he can't name them. He wouldn't name them. He said
the issue is not even the contract. The issue is how we govern ourselves. If supporting the contract will keep you in power, you will do that regardless of if it's in the interest of Guyana. Both opposition and ruling party will think like that because we have a winner-take-all system. If we had a system where we took away the winner-take-all architecture, where we'll have a parliament of constituency representatives as member of parliament, then we could come together and create a proper negotiating platform against Exxon. Right now, a winner-take-all, we have a different situation where whoever wants to remain in power or whoever wants to stay in power or to get power will know that if they renegotiate the contract, they'll be put out of power. Look around, look at history, look at Grenada. Why was Grenada invaded? For a couple hundred students, much less oil in Guyana. I mean, we're really becoming jokers intellectually.
Well, if you just join us, you listen to the countdown. We have Dr. Phillips with us, Eric Phillips, and he's telling us that we're not going to have an invasion in Guyana. We're already having an inside invasion of Venezuelans in Guyana. Not really an
Uncontrolled migration is always
uncontrolled migration invasion in Guyana happening.
And that's what Trump is dealing with right now.
Right. Because Trump is going to send back all those illegal Venezuelans out of America back to Venezuela. Let us see if the Maduro's going to stop the plane from landing on his airstrip with his own people.
No. He won't do that. He's smarter because he has a partnership. He wants to sell his oil. He wants to stay in power. So he'll negotiate. He'll release hostages. He'll give Chevron their license. And he will be happy and the U.S. will be happy.
We are seeing a trade war happen now between Canada and Mexico and America. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something that we should be worried about? Or
yes, because they'll have global repercussions depending on what Canada does and what Mexico does. We forget that there was a North American free trade area agreement a long time ago in which a lot of manufacturing from the U.S. went to Mexico. So, and also in Canada. And part of it was strategic for the U.S. because it wasn't just about manufacturing. It was about America getting access to Canada's fresh water. 70% of Canada's of North American fresh water is in Canada. So under the North American Free Trade Area, that was a strategic need of the U.S. So the agreement was made. But, if you look at Canada, Canada exports fuel to the U.S. If Trump puts a tariff on that, then fuel prices in the U.S. will go up. Electric power prices will go up. It's just a game of trying to get an advantage, to get some benefits. And depending on how Mexico retaliates, and Canada retaliates, it will impact us because America is the largest economy. Exxon, of course, is an American company. It's all about Canada and oil, and Guyana is about oil. So they're interlinkages.
So it's a lot of play and interplay. Doc, before we wrap up, there are some upcoming activities within ACDA, and that you need to update us on for the coming months.
Let me first update you on the Guyana Reparations Committee. We have a Black History Month tour of an exhibition called Africa Before Enslavement, where we start with Lucy, who was born 3.2 million years ago, takes us through the Lubumbo Bone, the migration to the rest of the world, the kings and queens, the kingdoms, Timbuktu, etc., etc. And we will be taking that to different villages throughout Guyana so that people could realize that the world didn't start 2,000 years ago. And that Africans have a huge heritage of technology, the pyramids. Pythagoras said he found pi, but pi was in the pyramids 2,000 years before he was born. So that's the Reparations Committee. We have our weekly or monthly TV programs on the second or fourth Sundays of every month, and we will have Sankofa dealing with young people. At ACDA, Black History Month, there is an exhibition there that covers a lot of things for schools. I think ACDA has sent out invitations to the schools to come visit. It's at their Aquaba Center or Community Center in Thomasland. We also have coming up the Day of the African Child. We have Ghana Day, which is an organization run by Sister Penda. And of course, that runs into pre-emancipation activities, then African Holocaust activities. But for now, the immediate thing is the month of February, MASH and Black History Month. followed by something that will happen in Easter, followed by Ghana Day, which is in June, etc., etc. But I encourage people to look at NCN every second and fourth Sundays at 8:30 p.m. for reparations now, because it's about education, it's about science, about music, it's about reparations, it's about history, and it's about having people understand who they are, know thyself. Most Africans in Ghana don't know themselves. And that's part of the problem with having a private sector. An Indian or Chinese in Ghana could go to India or go to China and find business partners. We, as Africans in Ghana, we don't even know where we come from. We don't even know where in Africa we could go. So that's part of the 15 issues that happened to us that put us in today's bottom of the ladder situation. There are 15 things we found, which we have in a book called the Ghana Reparations Committee, that started with the Dutch and British, that have resulted in people of African descent being where they are in Ghana. And most people don't know that.
For Emancipation Day coming up, Doc, are we having new kings and queens coming to Guyana from a different African country? Who are we having coming this year?
The kings and queens are going to Colombia and Costa Rica. I think ACDA is going to have an international artist. It's going to get a lot of local people. We have to promote our local artists. And of course, we will honor a city and honor a village. So look out, it's quite a way away, but I know ACDA and the team of young people, as you know, we have generational and succession planning going on. So we have a lot of young people who are taking over from us because we're the old heads and you need to make sure that you have sustainability. It's unfortunate that most of the African organizations in Guyana are populated with older people who are not willing to nurture younger people. We have a school at ACDA. We have about 100 young children. We take them in from 2 years, 6 age, 2 years, 6 months. We nurture them in terms of the national curriculum, but we also have them understand who they are. So the images, the imagery, the architecture at the school is about pyramids, it's about kings, it's about technology, because that's who they are. They were the first engineers, scientists, doctors, agriculturalists, and we need to let them understand that. So there's no fear of mathematics and all those types of things, because we are mathematics. We created mathematics. So those are the things that are going on within ACDA, emancipation. We hope the government does not interfere as it did last year. It doesn't interfere in other cultural events. It doesn't interfere in Diwali. It doesn't interfere in Ramadan. It doesn't interfere in all the other events. But for some reason last year, the government created its own black organization to try to dilute and destroy ACDA's annual event, which is an event that has historical dimension. So just selfishness.
Doc, in your closing, before we shut the program up, you have any closing thoughts you want to leave with us before we go?
Yes, I think Guyana needs to understand that it has a critical 5 years ahead of it. And that if we continue our modus operandi of separation, of exclusion, that all we're setting us up is for a corporate takeover by others in about 20 years. We need to have a budget that is people driven. We need to understand that it's not about if you're Indian or African or Amerindian or Chinese. We need to figure out how we work together. And that starts with changing the constitution. That starts with having representatives from communities in parliament. It starts with being honest about our history and teaching it in the school. It starts with having a realigned education system that is purpose and mission driven for the future. It's not about who has the most power. It's not about ethnic supremacy. We know how that works. We saw what happened in 1823. We saw what happened in 1763. We saw what happened in Suriname. We see what's going on all over the world. So if you're a smart leader, if you are a visionary leader, if you're an inspirational leader that really wants a true inclusive Guyana, a Guyana for all, and not a one Guyana, then we would act differently. And for people of African descent, they need to ask their leaders to represent them in their needs, to speak about 2030 with the floods, to speak about poverty, to speak about unemployment, to speak about exclusion from the huge amount of oil contracts. That's what they need to be speaking about, and to stop arguing that they're a national party, because very few people from other ethnic groups will be voting for them. And that is something they're kidding themselves about, that they're going to have enough things to offer other cultures when they can't even offer their own culture something. So they're living a life of politicians and not a life of servant leadership.
Chief Dr. Eric Phillips here for you. It's a pleasure seeing you here again, and we hope to have you back again to give us a more update of what's happening with ACDA and the Reparation Committee. So a pleasant good afternoon to you and the team in the Reparations Committee. All the best as we continue to fight for the rights of Africans in Guyana and around the Caribbean. Thank you so much for being on the show this morning. Chief Eric Phillips there for you. And we want to thank all of you for staying tuned with us. We are not done yet. We have a lot of more activities coming up. Stand by. We're going to be having Nation Watch coming up with this Budget 2025. And if you know anything about Raw Lucas, he will give you the stats that you need to know and the figures you need to put in place so you can know how to survive in this country with a budget that, as Eric Phillips says, only suits the political players. And so stay tuned for that. That is coming up at 12 noon right here on all the AP and AFC channels and other party channels. We will have that coming up at noon. And so stay tuned for that. As we go, all of you, a safe afternoon. And we're going to see you right back here again for more updates and for more information as we continue the countdown to elections 2025. Have a great day, and we'll see you back again on next Sunday.